our final engagement strategy. And when you think of a chrysalis or a pupa, what do you think of? Butterflies, right? And the whole notion of metamorphosis. Engagement strategy number 3 is mastering the art of change. Okay? I want to share, this is a funny story. When I was finishing up my master's degree, I was able to, this was before I was married, and before I had kids, so I was far more creative because my kids have eaten that part of my brain away for the most part. I was actually able to skip an entire course in my master's curriculum, the international business curriculum, and in exchange, I got my company to agree, all expenses paid, to let me go to Asia for about 12 days and then write a paper about it. It was sponsored by the school I was going to at that time, Baldwin Wallace, and part of that experience was actually staying with a Japanese host family. And this was the family, you can see it's 1997. This was the family. You can see my hair was considerably darker than in my complexion, considerably younger. But that was the host family that I stayed with. And the school really did this well. They had you do a survey, a questionnaire, so they could send it to the host family. You could tell them what you liked, what kind of food you liked. Now, when you go to Japan, what kind of food do you think of? Rice, sushi. How many people in here like sushi? I loved sushi. I lived in Portland, Oregon for 4 years, which has a high Asian population. I was kind of indoctrinated to it, and it got to the point where I was having sushi probably at least, at least once or twice a month. So when I came back to Cleveland and I had an opportunity to do this, I thought, go to Japan where sushi is king. So I put on there, what kinds of food do you like? Love all kinds of foods. Really looking forward to sushi. So I show up at my host family. It was like the third morning we were in Japan, and the wife, her name was Miyoki. Miyoki spoke a little bit of English, certainly more English than I spoke Japanese. So she said, Paul-san, my husband and I, Jun, we're so pleased to have you as our guest, and we're even more pleased to know that you like sushi. I said, Miyoki, whatever your family serves is okay for me. So that night for dinner, first of all, has anybody ever eaten dinner in a Japanese house? You know how the tables are like this close to the ground? My legs did not bend like that, so I've got like knees sticking everywhere. Anyways, Miyoki comes in, everybody else, and her husband Jun and the 2 children were sitting down, and she brings this plate, literally this big, of everything raw that you could imagine. And I could not identify a single piece of fish on there. In fact, very obviously missing was everything that was wrapped in rice, like rolls, like California rolls. There wasn't anything. And I was like, what have I done? I looked at this, and then I thought to myself, we have this whole notion of the ugly Americans and how we want everything to be McDonald's and when we go overseas. And I said, this is a moment of opportunity. I said, you can either say, no, I'm not going to eat this, or that's not what I had in mind when I thought of sushi, or you can kind of go with the flow. And I had this epiphany. I said, with enough soy sauce, you can kill the taste of anything. So I started diving in. I had a little of this and a little of that, and before you know it, the fish started disappearing, and the husband, Jun, he leans over and he whispers something in Miyoki's ear, and I thought, have I done something inappropriate? Have I have I botched a Japanese rule of etiquette? And I said, Miyoki, I said, have I done something inappropriate? And she says, oh, no, Paul-san, my husband Jun, he delighted you like sushi. He does not know you like so much of it. And what I didn't realize was that was going to be, in fact, dinner for the next 2 nights, not just that night. But in my house, when I was raised, that's not how we were. With 5 kids, the food was there until it was gone. So every one of us, I think, we have these moments of opportunity that we have to either go with the flow, experiment with something new, or say, that's not how I do things. And I'm going to ask you, always ask yourself, what is the absolute worst thing that could happen if you let go of your need to be right and move into something and give it a whirl? Do you have to fall in love with it? Nah. But what you could certainly do is increase your perspective and appreciation. Anybody know who this is? Another famous change agent. It's Charles Darwin. And last year, in 2009, was the 150th anniversary of the publishing of his particular book that has garnered so much attention over the years. Anybody remember what the name of that book was? The Origin of the Species, which was based on his sailing on a boat called the HMS Beagle to the Galapagos Islands. And when you think of Charles Darwin, there's a couple phrases that people apply to, Darwinism. What are some of the phrases that you hear people apply to Darwinism? Survival of the fittest, right? Now again, words trigger pictures in our brains. When you think of the fittest, what attributes do you normally think of? The fittest. The strongest, maybe the fastest, the smartest, right? Do you know that Charles Darwin never said anything about any of those things? If you go back and read his original work, what he said was this. He said, "It has been my observation that it is neither the strongest nor the smartest of the species that survive. Rather, it is those species which prove to be the most adaptable to changes in their environment that not only survive, but in fact thrive." How many of you have ever been stuck in a survival mode for a while? How many of you have ever had those rare glimpses of thriving? Now, if you had your choice, surviving versus thriving, which would you pick? I don't know about you, I'd pick the thriving piece. And isn't it really healthy to know that really part of all that's required is that I'd be willing to go with the flow a little bit. Adaptability. You could get frustrated at all the changes around. You could get as frustrated as you want. Does that change the reality? Does the rest of the world care that you're frustrated about the changes going on around you? No. So let's maybe rewire our own circuitry so that we are more willing to at least go with the flow, take a risk, expand your reference points, if nothing else. Okay? And by the way, when we do this, there's some fascinating research. I talked about neuroplasticity. Do you know that just by imagining something over and over and over again, you can actually lay down mental asphalt in your brain to become more experienced at it? Just like we did the experience with the cutting of the lemon. In fact, there was a really novel group of experiments done in Israel with pianists. They actually took concert pianists and they put these fMRI machines on their brains to kind of measure their brain activity. And what they found was they actually they monitored them while they were playing a particular piece of music. And they said, okay, now go into this other room and with no piano and simply take the sheet music and pretend that you're playing it. And what do you think the brain scan showed? The exact same activity. Every time you rehearse something, you get better and better and better at it. So anything that you're kind of a little bit, I'm not sure if I want to do that, if you think about it and you think you want to do it, just by kind of mentally rehearsing it using the technique I shared with you before, you actually build up the neural capacity to do it even before you actually get there.